One of the bigger questions the Sharks have to answer this season is what to do with Mikael Granlund. Should they trade arguably their biggest trade asset or keep him as a medium-term piece?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Western Conference Tuesday on the Locked On NHL channel. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. If you want to be an everyday, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be discussing Mikael Granlund. Look at the argument to trade Granlund, as he is arguably the Sharks' best and biggest trade asset in this year's trade deadline. The argument to keep Granlund, and then what a projecting contract would look like, looking at what some other comparable players signed for this off season. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Mikael Granlund, who arguably is the Sharks' best player right now and has been the Sharks' best player basically since he arrived last offseason. Sorry, the 2023-2024 offseason, part of the Erik Karlsson trade, which felt very much like a throw-in for the Penguins as they were trying to make salary. If you go back, remember, even before that time, there was talk of Mikael Granlund being a potential buyout for the Penguins as they were trying to open up some cap space to be able to do things. They ended up trading him to the Sharks, and the Sharks, I think, are feeling very happy about this Erik Karlsson trade as they've unloaded the Erik Karlsson money, or the majority of the Erik Karlsson money. They've gotten prospect Sam Dickinson out of it, and Mikael Granlund has been their best player since arriving. So let's start by looking at kind of what Granlund has done here in San Jose since he arrived. So if you remember, he missed kind of the beginning of last season. So so he played. I think he played about 69 games last year, where he had 60 points. But last year and this year, wanted to look at kind of what he has done so far since he's now actually played 83 games. In those 83 games, he has 18 goals, 56 assists, 179 shots on goal, is averaging 21:02 a night time on ice, which is ridiculous. Ridiculous. He's among, even this season, he's among the league leaders in ice time. So you know how important he is on the ice for the Sharks. Corsi, 442.98 goals, 442.86. With some of those defensive stats, as we're going to look at here in a second, you have to keep in mind the Sharks being so bad, right? Last year, they were brutal. We all know. This year, a little bit better. But looking at his evolving hockey numbers here, so played well over first line minutes. Again, when you're playing 21 minutes a night, 37th percentile player kind of playing those top line minutes, 76th percentile offensively, 2nd percentile defensively. His offense is very good. The defense is, questionable in this, but you also, again, have to kind of take into account how bad the San Jose Sharks have been defensively, especially last season. He's, goals above replacement on the power play last season. He was really great. Was solid on the penalty kill. Was also playing top line penalty kill. Like every situation, Mikael Granlund has been playing a ton of minutes for the Sharks. So the argument to trade Mikael Granlund is he's your biggest and best asset, right? You look at kind of all the other players that the Sharks have potentially to trade. You have maybe like a Cody Cece, Jan Ruda, who I've made on this very podcast the argument that he should be in the press box. You have guys like Luke Cunnin, who could be potentially be a nice piece for somebody, a guy like Nico Sturm. All these guys are kind of ancillary, like, okay, it would be nice to upgrade this position type of players. The way Mikael Granlund has played, he's an absolute kind of like a needle mover, not like a game breaker, but he's a needle mover. Like he's a guy who can really upgrade another team's middle six, right? On a championship quality team or on a really, really good team, Granlund's probably not their first line center or first line winger like he is with the Sharks, but he is a really good middle six type of player. Granlund, who's also 32 and turns 33 in February, is also probably not part of your future, right? Especially with Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, Phil Beested, who I think will make his NHL debut at the end of the season and probably be fighting for an NHL spot next offseason. Like you kind of feel pretty confident down in the middle. You have guys like Tyler Toffoli, who just signed for 4 years, William Eklund, Fabian Zeller is probably going to get a big contract. Like you're starting to run out of spots for dudes, right? So for the Sharks, this could be another, I don't want to say Erik Karlsson situation, but this could be another situation where you're selling high on a player, right? Granlund, who's basically at a point per game pace for the Sharks right now, does everything, plays on the power play, plays on the penalty kill, plays a ton of minutes at even strength, maybe not the best face-off guy, but like he is a guy who can help a team win. And if a team needs to try to upgrade their middle six, Mikael Granlund can do that. He's in the last year of his deal at $5 million AAV. That will be something the Sharks will have to kind of work around, especially since they do not have any more retention slots. So they can't retain his contract. So just one of the kind of wrenches to keep in mind is you're most likely are going to have to find a third party to retain some of it, and that eats away at what you're getting back. And who knows, again, it's too early to kind of but I think a realistic asking price is probably a second round pick for Mikael Granlund, maybe a first. If the Sharks could retain in that whole, retain that contract, the Sharks could easily ask for a first. But let's just be conservative and say, Mikael Granlund kind of continues at the pace he's on, maybe is kind of projected to be like a 70, 75 point player by the end of the season. Asking for a second round pick or basically getting the equivalence of a second round pick, whether it's a first and you have to give something up, or you're gonna have to eat something with the retainer, like finding that third team, whatever it is. But we'll just say they get kind of like the value's like a mid second round pick, all said and done, right? That's good for the Sharks, who aren't going to be winning anything anytime soon. To get more pieces for them to draft. We've seen what Mike Grier has been able to do in the draft, whether it's moving up, getting guys, who we feel confident about what their future is. You look at last year's second round picks. You have Chernishev, who I know hasn't gotten to play yet this year, but a lot of people felt like was a mid first round pick. Leo Salin Walenis, who's I think is projected to be a really nice piece for the Sharks at some point. There's plenty of great players that you can get in the second round, or you can use that to trade for an established NHL player. Like if you want to add people it gives you a lot of stuff to go do something else later, right? You look at Askarov, right? Sharks basically traded Tomas Hertl for Askarov. Like you could trade Granlund, whatever you get from the Granlund, turn that into a younger NHL player who can help you win in the now and in the future. So for the Sharks, Mikael Granlund, who's 32, going to be 33 at the end of the season, is he going to be part of your mid to long-term plans? And especially when you have guys who you expect to start to hit the NHL scene here sooner rather than later. You look at guys like Phil Beested, like I mentioned, right? I know Kasper Halttunen, still rookie, but You expect him, rookie season in the AHL, but you expect him to, earn some NHL playing time at some point. Colin Graff, like the Sharks have a ton of these guys, plus whatever they do in free agency, because they're going to have a bunch of cap space. So is it worth hitching your wagon to a 33-year-old player who has played very well for you? We'll talk about that here in a minute, but is it worth it for the Sharks to hitch their wagon to a 33-year-old player when you feel like you could use that money either elsewhere in free agency to add younger players who maybe fit the timeline a little bit better, or use that roster spot for some of your prospects as they continue to grow and develop? So that's kind of the case against Granlund. Is his age. He's probably going to cost a lot of money, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And when do you start to see a slip? And plus, what you get back from Granlund, you can go do other things with. So we'll look at the reason to keep Mikael Granlund, because Mikael Granlund's been very good. And we'll look at what a potential contract could look like by looking at some other guys who signed new contracts this free agency, who kind of are in the same ballpark as Mikael Granlund. So we'll talk about that here in just 1 second. If you want to get tickets to go to the tank to see the Sharks, or maybe you want to catch a Warriors game, or whatever it is you want to do, you need to check out Game Time. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have views of your seats before you buy. Nothing worse than getting to an event and realizing, boy, do my seats stink. They have curated deals, of course, to make it easier to find the best price on great seats. So if you're like me, right, and I have kids and I don't want to spend a bunch of money on seats that I'm probably going to spend half my time walking around or not in, so I usually just want to kind of get in cheap. Or if you're one of those people and you need to sit really close, they've got you covered there. So right now, Game Time is having an exclusive deal also on the NHL Winter Classic event at Wrigley Field. Go to the Game Time app to purchase tickets and get 10% off bleacher seating and 20 to 25% off home plate seat area seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON, NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And if you want to jump in on the NFL action, of course, you can do that with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So you get the hunch in the middle of a game, check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book partner of the NFL. All right, so Mikael Granlund, he's been really good. Arguably your best player over the past season plus. The Sharks, who have gone out of their way to tear this thing down, and have kind of made it a point that, like, we kind of have to start building here. And I think Granlund can be a really solid piece for the next few seasons, right? Especially as Macklin Celebrini grows through his development. Will Smith through his development. William Eklund continues to take his next steps. Fabian Zetterlund establishes himself. Like, having a guy like Granlund around who can play in whatever situation you need, play in center, play on the wing, whatever you need Granlund to do, he can do it. And it takes pressure off your young stars to have to fill that role, right? If you take Granlund away, young players are going to have to fill those steps maybe sooner than you would want to, right? And you've seen Mike Grier be very patient with pulling before he brings prospects up. giving guys a little bit of a leash. Look at like Will Smith. They have a very structured, like, we want Will Smith to make sure he's taking days off. We want to make sure that like he's fully preparing himself to be an full-time NHL player. I know Celebrini just coming back from his injury, so we'll see kind of what that happens with Celebrini. But I mean, yes, I know this season they're going to be kind of doing that, and you fully expect next season these guys to be all 82 games ready to go and continue their growth and development. But with any young player, right, there's going to be peaks and valleys, and having a guy like Mikael Granlund who's pretty steady most nights, like you don't see not too many games we watch and go, man, Mikael Granlund had a bad night tonight. Like he's had really great nights, but most nights Mikael Granlund has been good for the Sharks. And for the Sharks, having a guy like that for the next few seasons, especially guys wearing an A right now, that seems okay, right? And you're not putting pressure on your Colin Graffs or your Beasteds or, some of your other players to make the jump sooner rather than later. Like they will, when they're ready to take a job, they will take a job. And right, I think for a guy like Granlund who can play whatever position, it's good to have good players on your team. And hopefully the hope is, as some of the young players get up, Granlund maybe gets pushed down, but then you have good players on your third line, right? And you don't have to have your Luke Cunnins and Barclay Goodrows surrounding Will Smith. And then instead of Will Smith on the third line, it's a Philip Beasted, and Granlund can kind of be the Beasted mentor as Beasted kind of comes into his own. And you're surrounding him with good players to make his transition easier. So, and the Sharks, they have a ton of cap space, right? Like I don't think we can overemphasize how much cap space the Sharks will have going into next season. Because like this team, you look at who's going to probably need new contracts next year. Like Fabian Zetterlund's like the big one, right? And we've kind of talked about what his number might look like, but it's nothing that's going to kind of break the bank. Luke Cunnin, Nico Sturmer are UFAs, and like okay, Clean Costin, who's going to be an RFA, like maybe doesn't have a job. Zetterlund is a RFA. Like Giovanni Smith isn't gonna, if you want to keep him, it's not gonna cost you much. CC and Ruda, like you're gonna need to do some work on the back end to maybe bring somebody in, but you're gonna have a lot of cheap contracts with guys like Shakir Mukhamadullin, who I know he's in the last year of his deal, but he's still an RFA, and that's going to be a cheap contract for the kind of foreseeable future, right? Luca Cagnoni, Jack Thompson, like all these guys are on really cheap contracts, and you have to kind of spend your money somewhere, just even to hit the cap floor. And, Askarov is on a very reasonable $2 million deal. Starting next year, you're going to have to re-sign one of the goalies, but none of those guys I think are going to be like breaking the bank. Like the Sharks going into next season with a roster of 14 out of 23, they're going to have $36 million in cap space. And that's including Logan Couture and Vlasic, who are both, who knows what happens with those guys. You're going to have to spend money somewhere. And if you're going to spend money, why don't you spend money on kind of a known commodity? And that's Mikael Granlund, right? You don't have to question, well, what's he going to look like in the system, because he's been playing on this team with these guys for the last, basically 2 years by the time you're going to be looking at his contract. So for the Sharks, right, it's good to have good players. Mikael Granlund's a good player. Yes, he's getting a little bit older, but it's okay to have some older players on your team to help insulate your younger players. And if I'm going to spend the money on somebody, I'd rather spend the money on what I know is going to happen. Like, I believe Mikael Granlund is going to, yes, he's going to decline over the next couple of seasons, but I still think he's going to give you a high enough floor. And as his role hopefully decreases as your young players kind of continue to step up, I think you can just get a nice solid 2 to 3 seasons out of Mikael Granlund and go from there. So what would a potential contract look like, and what would a contract I be comfortable giving Mikael Granlund for San Jose as they potentially kind of, if they want to keep him. So we'll look at some guys who signed contracts this kind of in the same ballpark of Mikael Granlund. So we'll get some of these guys, what they signed for this offseason, and what I think would be a very reasonable price for the Sharks. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't a search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Let's go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, before we continue, of course, I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. For your second listen, go check out one of the other great shows here on the Locked On Network. Of course, you have Locked On Fantasy Hockey. So if your fantasy team needs some help, they've got you covered. Who to target on the waiver wire, who to target in trades, who you need to cut bait on. They've got you covered over at Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Or check out any of the shows here in the Bay Area as they've got you covered, right? Locked On Warriors, Locked On A's, Locked On Giants, Locked On Niners. You can find any of those shows wherever you find this podcast, or you can also watch on YouTube as well. So, Mikael Granlund, what type of contract are we potentially looking at for Granlund? And these guys here, I wanted to kind of pull up who are in the same ballpark. And one of these guys is very much better player than Mikael Granlund, but I wanted to kind of show you like just everything. Okay. For guys who are kind of the same age range. So Steven Stamkos, who again, much better player. It's not close. Like Stamkos is a much better player, but last season he scored in 78 games, 40 goals, 41 assists, 262 shots on goal, played 18-14 time on ice, Corsi for 49.33, goals for 44.14, right? Steven Stamkos, one of our generation's best players, first overall pick, like, right? He was coming off a deal, like an $8.5 million deal with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Last season, playing first line minutes, again, not as versatile, right? Stamkos, like not playing the penalty kill, not as many minutes a night. 52nd overall player, 77th percentile offensively, 9th percentile defensively. So like, the offensive percentiles are very close. An absolute insane weapon on the power play. And again, Stamkos, 40 goal scorer last season. Like, Granlund's not hitting that type of production, but he this offseason signed a new deal, of course, with the Nashville Predators, where he signed a 4-year deal at $8 million AAV, so $32 million. And this deal is way more than Mikael Granlund, who again is coming off he will be finished up a $5 million AAV contract, but I just wanted to show you the very top end shelf. Stamkos and Granlund, like they're in the same ballpark as in like, Granlund may be in right field, but like you can kind of see some of the comparables, at least between, like their ice time, like their production. Again, Stamkos scores a bajillion goals. That's why he gets paid the big bucks. So just want to show you the top end shelf here. A guy who I think is maybe a little bit more comparable, and his contract is very similar. That would be Adam Henrique. So he was playing his age 33 season. He was making $5.825 million, and he was traded from the Ducks to the Oilers. 82 games last year. He had 24 goals, 27 assists, 140 shots on goal. Played 1651 average time on ice, 48.2 Corsi for, 56.38 goals for. Looking at his numbers, so he played second line minutes where he was 69th, very nice, percentile forward, 78th percentile offensively, 32nd percentile defensively. Played a lot on shorthanded, not as much maybe a power play, especially on the Oilers, right? It's a little bit harder to crack that top power play unit. But you see kind of the numbers really similar. And maybe if Granlund wasn't playing as many minutes, he could, have maybe a little bit better kind of production, or like, if you're not maybe kind of killing them every night with all the minutes. But he, Adam Henrique, so he re-signed with the Edmonton Oilers this offseason. He signed a 2-year deal at $3 million AAV. So something to kind of keep in mind. Of course, the Oilers, much more cap strap team. They're trying to win a championship. Maybe he took a little bit of a discount to go play, like try to win a championship type of player. Henrique is also, like I said, he was coming off a 5-year deal at $5.825 million. So kind of like again, Mikael Granlund, with his deal was at 4 years at $5 million. Henrique, a little bit more cap space, a little bit more of a goal scorer, but not as many assists, right? I know Granlund scored more goals kind of in his past life, played with Nashville, but kind of where they're at right now. I think Granlund's more of a kind of a setup guy compared to Henrique, but Granlund also, I think, plays in more situations, also plays a lot more. So you could argue he could ask for more money. Another guy to kind of compare, and this one, again, kind of it's same ballpark, also a little bit of a special case as well, is Matt Duchene, former teammate of Granlund. Duchene, 33, made $3 million last year with the Dallas Stars, played 80 games, 25 goals, 40 assists, 172 shots on goal, 1646 time on ice last year, 49-41, and 60% goals for, 49-41 Corsi for, 60% goals for. His numbers, so he first line minutes, he played 68th percentile type of player, played first line minutes, 81 percentile offensively, 17th percentile defensively. He also played a ton of power play, didn't really play too much shorthanded, which kind of keep in mind for Granlund. Duchene this offseason re-signed with the Dallas Stars. He signed a 1-year deal at $3 million. A couple things to keep in mind with Matt Duchene. He also got bought out. So he has money like coming to him no matter what. So he can take a smaller contract for a team like Dallas, who is trying to win a championship, has, maybe a little bit of a discount for a team like Dallas, who's very close, right? Went to the Western Conference Finals last season, wants to make a run this season. Like, that makes a lot of sense for him. So what I think, though, this means for Granlund is I think he's between, right? Stamkos is way up here. He's not getting Stamkos money. It doesn't make sense to give him Stamkos money and or Stamkos term at 4 years at $8 million. I'm not doing that. The Duchene Henrique contracts, I think, are a little bit lowball, but you can also be like, those teams are trying to win a championship. Those guys maybe sign a little bit smaller deals so they can try to go win a championship. A guy like Duchene who's getting buyout money no matter what, like, he's still getting to pay. Like, you don't have to feel bad for Matt Duchene in his $3 million contract. So I think a very realistic and reasonable contract is, I'm giving Granlund 3 years at $5 million a year. Give him 3 years, $15 million. 3 years. That'll put it so him and Toffoli will both end at the same time. This still gives you plenty of cap space for when you have to sign Eklund, Celebrini, and Smith. Like Toffoli and Granlund's deals will be coming off after the first year of the Celebrini and Smith deals. Like Eklund's deal will be a couple, I think 2 seasons in. That's before you're going to have to, maybe pay some of your other guys like Musty or Haltonens or whomever else, kind of, or your Shakir, like a lot of these other guys. So I think maybe you can buy a little bit of time with their contracts. So I'm offering him at 3 years and $15 million. And I would work hard to re-sign Granlund because I think you burned down this thing enough. I think Granlund's a good player. I think he has a role, a very easy to see role over the next couple seasons. And I think the cost, again, if I'm going to have to pay money for guys, I would rather pay money for what I know I'm going to get. And I think you're going to get quality play from Granlund for the next 2 to 3 seasons. So I would maybe try to go for 2 years. If you maybe have to bump it up at like $5.5 million a season, go for that. Yeah, if he wants that 3rd year, I'd go 3 for 15. So at $5 million a year, I think that is a very fair contract, especially if you compare some of these other contracts where it's more than what Duchesne and Henrique are getting. They're very comparable players, but those guys are also special situations. So that would be what I would do if I was Mike Grier. Is I would offer Mikael Granlund 3 for 15. I would see what's out there in the trade deadline. If somebody blows you away, it's like, I'll give you the moon for Granlund, then you have to take that deal. If not, Mikael Granlund, we'd love for you to be a San Jose Shark for the next 3 years. Here's 2 years at 5.5, or here's 3 years at $5 million a pop. Please sign. We'd love to have you around. Please help, helping mentor our young kids. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about the Sharks Wild. So make sure to follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.